Hi, this is Graphically Alex, coming at you with all things fat related. If that's something that interests you, please subscribe. I'd love to have you. So today we're going to cover more of this Is Body Positivity Over with Virgie Tovar. I still want to hear everything she has to say about Ozempic, like especially when she's presenting it to somebody who's not totally in the fat acceptance sphere, even though it's pretty clear to me that these hosts are very much fat acceptance-y. But we're going to go ahead and continue to hear her takes about Ozempic. I have a feeling this is going to be a common trend. I think this is where fat acceptance is going to go next. I don't know how effective it will be, but that's beside the point. Besides the point, whatever. Let's go.
But given that we are an internet culture podcast, as someone who's just sort of a casual scroller and observer, the thing that's been remarkable to me is like we hear that all the time, that thin is back in, but like what that actually means for real people, even beyond obviously the like intense emotional and self-esteem issues that creates, is there are a lot of, like, because I feel like I come to a lot of things just from a creator lens because that's what we cover. There are a lot of creators who like were able to make a living out of this spreading body positivity, but not even just being able to have that body as creators and brands because it was trendy working with them. But now they're finding those opportunities are drying up. And I actually want to play a clip of a creator who I love called Joanna Spicer. This is from a little earlier last week, and she's coming on and she's kind of having a moment, and she's not necessarily talking about the fall of the body positivity movement specifically, but she's talking about that like something has happened to her career. And I just want to play this specific part of it because it really illuminated for me just what these ripple effects can be.
It's been hard to see other people who are younger and thinner and prettier, live the life I want, the life I was living at one point, and I'm just like, I don't know, like, I don't know what I did. I don't know my brands.
Oh my gosh. I mean, that's hard to listen to, at least for me. Trends change and stuff. I think it's hard for people to accept that. I think too, like when you're in a certain industry, especially if it's like modeling or even acting, even to a certain extent, like singing, although that's less true, like people do tend to age out of those industries, or unless if they're able to evolve, or unless if they're able to provide something, there's never, whenever you're in that sort of front-facing, looks-based type of career, you have to evolve with the time. You have to shift. So to me, it just sounds like she wasn't able to evolve with it. Like even something like YouTube, people that have been on YouTube for a very long time, they've had to evolve. You have to evolve as the platform changes. You have to evolve as the algorithm changes. You have to evolve as trends change. You have to evolve as culture changes, like in order to stay relevant. And a lot of people don't do that. A lot of people kind of just have their moment in the sun and then it passes. There are your rare exceptions of people who can last a very long time, but it's not typical. And so to me, that's what that's giving. I mean, they're going to blame the company and they're going to blame body positivity, et cetera, but that's more of a common thing in which trends change within these like front-facing, image-based types of careers. And you have to level up or bring something fresh and new to the table, or you're left behind. That's kind of how it is, and we are in a sort of coming of age time where, Gen Z is taking more cultural prominence and millennials are not as culturally prominent, you know, or we're starting to kind of age out or just progress, or, you know, a lot of people are having families or things like that. People move on with life. You know, we're going into, hopefully, you know, leading institutions and things like that, rather than being in that cultural sphere, which is more like 20s stuff, you know? So I think that I feel like a lot of millennials in general, this is kind of a millennial cringe moment, in my opinion. I don't know if she is a millennial, but it's giving that she is. But it's that kind of thing where a lot of millennials think that they're the exception, or that like generational trends don't happen to us, or that things don't change. Like, I don't know what that is. I don't know if it's like millennial delusion or something, but I see it a lot. I do. Millennials pushed fat acceptance very hard, and it flopped. And a lot of millennials can't evolve. And that's what that's giving to me. So to me, that's kind of like millennial floppitude. I don't see it as like just a fat acceptance issue. I see it as like a generational issue. In a lot of ways, it makes me nervous. You can hear my stomach getting upset. It makes me uncomfortable. As a millennial, it's kind of scarring. But to me, that's where I hear that. You know, perhaps certain things didn't work out, or certain dreams didn't happen. You know, I think a lot of millennials are at that. Or maybe the dream was there and then it's not happening anymore, you know? I think a lot of millennials are faced with that right now. And this is just an example of it. So I don't really like them pushing that as like, this is the company's fault. It's like, no, it's, you didn't evolve. You didn't progress. You didn't use what you got wisely. You wasted it. So if you don't have any money, you didn't save any money. There's nothing wrong with the company wanting a fresher face or trying to sell to a new generation. It's life, you know? It is.
Don't want me anymore. It's like, because it's not trendy to be plus size anymore, because I'm 35.
Yeah, millennial.
I don't know, but it's been hard not to have this like huge identity crisis about it.
And so you hear that, and you hear that not only is this...
You have to evolve. You have to shift as a creative. And that's honestly just, that's true for anybody. I think that's true for a lot of different industries, if we're being real about it. And I don't think you can't do modeling at 35, or you can't have brands at 35, but you gotta evolve with the trends and shift and level up, bring something new to the table, or you could even transition into a different career. I mean, things change, you know? Like when I was in my 20s, I was a writer. I happily quit, which a lot of people are like, don't ever quit. Oh my gosh, don't ever quit. I never felt so much relief than when I quit writing. Like, I think it was one of the best decisions I ever did. I think just because for me, I had that kind of, it was giving like 20s Delulu, where I thought I could do anything or everything all at once. That's kind of a millennial flop thing. I'm not trying to get too millennial-y in this, but it's something that happened to a lot of us, where it's like, don't put your eggs in one basket. Don't, you know, spread yourself super thin all the time. It was a huge mistake for me, career-wise, to try to be on YouTube and to write as well. But I couldn't like admit to myself that YouTube was more of a passion. And so anyways, as I was nearing the end of my 20s and a lot of stuff was going on, I switched gears, and I started a new thing. You know, I'm in a new lane. And I took YouTube more seriously. Like, YouTube was more of like a hobby or like a diary for me. And then it became the main thing. And I quit writing, and it was a huge relief. So I don't think it's always bad to evolve. It's not, I think a lot of people need to understand, like, it's a good thing sometimes to shift in your 30s. Especially as a creative or somebody in the, like, a different type of industry like that. Sometimes it's good to shift. It's not for everybody. Not everybody has to. I mean, if you're succeeding, you're succeeding. If you love it, you love it. But for me, I wasn't really succeeding as a writer. I didn't really love it. And even if something worked, and if it's not working anymore, then you can just change. It's like, I think that that's something I see a lot. Not even just within millennials, but also within, like, the idea of fatness. I think a lot of people have a hard time moving on or having a different season of life. I do think there is, like, there's something within the toxic ritualistic. There's probably some kind of connection to it. Or maybe it is a toxic ritualistic drive of not allowing seasons of your life to change. You know, not allowing things to shift. Even if it's like going from high school to college, or from college to the workforce, or from one career to the next. From being single to being married, from being childless to having a kid. Like, I think there is a lot of issues within shifting seasons of life within the toxic ritualistic. I think sometimes there might be a subconscious drive to try to hold on to, like, your teenage brain or something, you know, like way beyond its time. But I've heard that too, that it damages your brain and you're not able to mature. There's a lot of things I've heard about it, but it's interesting food for thought. You know, I don't know about that, but it is a trend I see of a refusal to grow up, or like a severe emotional stunting type of vibe within the toxic ritualistic, that I do have to bring it up within this too, because let me break it down for you. It's normal to have different seasons of life. It's normal to grow and change throughout, especially decades of life. That's what's normal. It's not normal to be stagnant. That's abnormal. That's bizarre. That requires something toxic to keep it going. So I'm just saying, I do see that a lot, especially within a lot of fat activists. I've seen a refusal to grow up, and I think there might be some deep psychological drives to that, but also some physical aspects too, possibly, you know, damaging your brain and stuff like that.
Trend hurting people emotionally. It's like hurting their livelihood just for having this body. And then back to the predatory nature, they get an email in their inbox from a brand that does want to work with them, and it is a GLP-1.
Yeah, no, I'm really loving that you're using the P word. I think that's exactly predatory is exactly what it is, and I think we need to be honest. I mean, I really want to speak to what this person is talking about, because I mean, I can feel it in my body. We have these words like trends. We have that are very separate from the human reality of what we're talking about here. To your point, what I always remind people is that we're talking about vulnerable populations. Yeah. When you're talking about a person in a larger body, you are talking about someone who has experienced weight.
You choose to be in a larger body. So that's really important to understand too about this topic specifically. It's a choice.
Discrimination. They've experienced wage-based discrimination. They've experienced fashion-based discrimination, dating. They've been treated differently at school than their other sort of schoolmates. These are people who are marginalized. Yeah. And then I think what's really challenging is to, like when I think about the work, like I've been doing this work in fat activism or fat liberation, body positivity, whatever you want to call it. I've been doing it for a long time, and it's been a therapeutic journey.
I think it's really interesting how so many within the toxic ritualistic, especially on the BINGE side, they put fatness on such a pedestal that it's like it eclipses all logic, all other explanations. Everything always goes back to fat. Everything. Every single thing within the mind of somebody extremely toxically ritualistic goes down to you are fat or you are thin. And so every single outcome in your life is because of that. Like, imagine not understanding that social media shifts within the years. Imagine not understanding that creatives have to evolve and shift with trends, or you can be last season. Imagine thinking that it's 100% weight related. And it has nothing to do with time passing, generational shifts, right? Seasons of life, an inability to evolve in an industry. Which, yes, if it's a visual industry and visual demand has shifted, aka plus size is not a trend anymore, then in order to stay alive in that career choice, then you'd have to shift, which you can. That is a choice that she's making to not. So that's important to understand too. You know, I think it's tough to have a visually based career if you are toxically ritualistic. I think it can be a trigger in general, but if you are based in that, then it can be a little bit of a problem, you know? And regardless of what people act like, I'm not in one. And that really puts a lot of pressure off of me to know that I don't have to look any kind of way or whatever. All I have to do is be real, show up, show my face, lose the weight, dead ass. That's what it is. Because it's about a point. It's not about selling an image. But when you are in a career that does sell an image, it's, you know, yeah, I'm sure the younger girls and all that stuff, they're having the money and they're having that you had when you were their age, you know? It is what it is. Circle of life, etc., etc. That's why you hope that you use it wisely, or you save it, or you figure out what your next goal will be, or you evolve, you know. That's all.
A spiritual journey. It's been like every kind of journey, right? And it's a lot of work. And I think too, when I think about like vulnerable populations, to your point, these are people experiencing wage-based discrimination already. And then they have this moment that's so where they get to feel like they're just like their colleague, maybe for the first time, or maybe that they have advantages over their colleague, and just what this means in the historical reality of this issue. This is major. And so, of course, you have someone who is already vulnerable. Maybe they did or did not have the resources, the time, or the interest to do the level of work you have to do in order to just begin to unravel any of this, like any of what happened to you as a kid, any of what's happened to you as an adult, all of.
What does that even mean? At a certain point, Virgie, like, a job is a job. A job is not your therapist. A job is not your best friend. A job is not your family. A job is an arrangement to make money, essentially. If you're in a looks-based career, like if you're modeling, for example, you have to be marketable. You have to be able to bring money to the company or the product or whatever. If you can no longer do that, then you're out of a job. Or if somebody else can do it better, then you're out of a job. These are very competitive industries. And it's not your job to help you deal with your trauma and stuff. I mean, we need to take responsibility for things that have happened to us. We need to heal ourselves. We need to do all this stuff the best that we can, or what? What's your other option? You're just going to go through your entire life without doing any internal work and basically flopify and not really do what you could have done had you done that? To all my Gen Zs listening, that's the answer for a lot of millennials. It's to flopify, never get over the past, and just not be what they could have been. And all I can advocate for is don't be like us. And that's a very grim statement. Again, it's something I've been thinking about a lot. I've really been thinking about my generation, even my station in life. And obviously this is it's kind of deep. It's not 100% related, but it is related, because the toxic ritualistic is definitely something that you need to unpack. If you got it going on, the younger the better, pretty much. There's always hope, etc. I don't care how old you are, you can get rid of it. But at the end of the day, a lot of millennials don't do the work. And they expect it to just magically happen or something. Or they expect things to just magically never change. And it's not exactly a recipe for success. I've been that way in my past, and I almost died. So, life is you evolve or you die, essentially. That's life. Okay?
The work that I think is involved in working through body shame, that should not be demanded of every single person. And so some people just, again, don't want to do it, don't have the blah, 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 whatever. There's lots of reasons why, and they're all legitimate. But, I think to ask our influencers to have somehow like some spiritual sense of fortitude as vulnerable people to stand up against, to your point, these brand deals when they're losing their other source of income. It's just a lot.
Yeah. It's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking to hear, because...
Was that some kind of a statement on why this person should not have to lose weight? Is that what that was? Is that what that was? Because I don't even know what she was really trying to say there.
I think a lot of being a body positive influencer, kind of owning that identity and being known for that, a lot of people love to describe them as brave and strong and like tough. Someone who can really defeat the societal norms that have been placed and just kind of oppressed us as women and people. And kind of thinking and speaking to like Aerie, for example, one of these big companies that was part of the body positivity movement and has really backed away from that. There is a clip from someone who was a really front-facing name and person of Aerie's campaign. They are the model Iskra Lawrence. And I would love for us to play this clip of Iskra speaking on the Net Worth and Chill podcast about how the money changed once Aerie stepped away from their body positivity mission and campaign. The first voice you'll hear is the host of that podcast, Vivian.
After multiple years of you working with them, they didn't renew your contract when you were 6 months postpartum.
I cried for 5 days straight. I had this rolling contract. It was renewed every year for the last 5-ish years. There was a point where I had $1 million in the bank. Woo! I'm not saying that's a good move. I'm saying
you felt safe.
I felt safe. I've been told over and over again, I was family. This brand was nothing without me. I built this brand, blah, blah, blah. And then it wasn't even a call from them. It was a call from my agent who just said, yeah, they've cut everyone's contract. And again, I wish I hadn't attached so much of my sense of self to it, but it was like my identity.
The commonality between those two clips, is just this idea of safety.
I think if they cut out everybody, I wonder if they were having a business issue. you know, we're not exactly in like a thriving global economy right now. So I wonder if there's something like that going on. If it's everybody's contract, then it's even less personal. That's just my thoughts, just hearing that. Which that does suck. So I don't know what to tell you. Like, that really sucks. But, you know, that is a scary thing just in general. That's just like a human thing of like, what am I going to do if I lose my job? You know what I'm saying? So it's not really related to fatness, but I guess we'll hear how they connect it.
And that is where this really gets me, is that this for some people, you know, there's been this distinction of like, was this a movement or was it a moment? And
Yeah.
and this is like the consequence of it being a moment, which is like you said, giving this
It was a moment. It was. It wasn't even that long. So I guess, you know, it probably lasted about 8 years. It probably lasted, in my opinion, I think it lasted from like 2015 to 2023. Basically, like around that time. It wasn't even a full decade. So it was definitely a moment. Which I could see them saying, oh, it was Ozempic, but I think it had more to do with the panini. I think, you know, 2023 isn't just the year that Ozempic became popularized. It's also when pretty much everywhere got out of lockdown completely. You know, there were still some places that were holdouts throughout 2022. But in 2023, it really is that kind of first year, you know, pretty much globally that it was done. And I think that a lot of trends that happened, or coping mechanisms or things to deal with the panini, were no longer relevant to the vast majority of people. So I think there was probably a greater shift towards people trying to get back to pre-panini weight and stuff, especially a lot of mid-sized people who had gained in 2020. They're like, okay, I want to lose it again, you know. And I think it just kind of all went into one big thing. You know, sometimes trends can have multiple layers, multiple things happening at the same time of why things change. And Ozempic is obviously a part of that, but I don't think it's the only part of it. I think if we're looking at the big thing, it probably is the panini. That's probably the biggest reason why it started to go away. I know that that's why it changed for me personally. And I was a diehard person of the toxic ritualistic. Like, I was so advanced in it, I was acting like I was out of it when I wasn't. So, even to myself, but I was fighting it. But I'm just saying, like, I didn't see it with crystal clarity until the panini. And it took me, you know, which I guess I'm a trend hopper. I don't know. I guess I got on the trend. I always say I chose a good time to, you know, have my health totally collapse, I guess. It was really 2020 and 2021. But as I was kind of regenerating and things were progressing with the panini, towards the end of 2022, I was healthy enough to sustainably lose. And so going into 2023, literally started this activism and literally went headfirst into sustainable downsizing and was a part of that trend, and it had nothing to do with Ozempic. But sometimes the stars align, so to speak, you know. But that's what I think it is.
marginalized group a sense of safety, and then it's just being ripped out. And I think one of the perplexing parts of this for me has been when, you know, let's say an influencer, for whatever reason, who was openly in a bigger body, decides to take one of these drugs. we've seen more than once that when they talk about their decision to do that, they point to the body positive community as like that gets the blame. Like there was another creator named Tess Holiday. She posted a TikTok that is like a trend, so we like playing it when it would just be a sound with no sense. But what she captions it with is seeing another plus size influencer lose weight just to turn around and blame the body positive community. Why that, of all the things that was happening, I would not expect that like the community itself would be like demonized by the very people who were in it. Like what why?
Yeah, I mean,
It has to do with because they're canceled. So when you are canceled from something, or if you're not allowed to leave, it creates a lot of tension and a lot of animosity towards it. And that's essentially what it is. Again, it's not really a fatness thing. This is kind of basic human psychology. If you adhere to something so deeply, whether it's just a belief system, generalized like fat acceptance, whether it's politics, religion, or you could even get into things like addiction or the toxic ritualistic. If you leave it, which, there's a lot of it. It's kind of all lumped in within fat acceptance to a certain extent. It's kind of like where all those things align, So when you have that all going together, it's like, of course, there's a shunning or a hatred or a cancellation aspect for leaving. But that same thing is why people hate the body positivity community once they leave, and why they talk out against it. Because as human beings, when we're leaving something, especially if it was something near and dear to us, we often have to distance ourselves from it. And even for me, even if it's not near and dear to us, like for example, when I was no longer fat, when I was becoming mid-size, I socially had to distance myself from fatness as a part of leaving that category socially, because it is a social category. So sometimes you have to make statements. Now, you don't have to, people do this in different ways. I started identifying as mid or mid-size, which is just like you're not fat and you're not thin. You're just there. You're in between, basically. And it helped me and it helped other people understand that I wasn't fat anymore. And then by the time I was just getting towards average, it was really easy for me to say I'm not fat. So, it was a part of a psychological or sociological thing, a social thing of distancing from that, which sometimes you have to. And sometimes people do that in a lot of different ways. This is just very basic human psychology. But especially if you're shunned when you leave, then it gets really nasty usually. And that's why people do that with body positivity, because they cancel and they shun. Like I wasn't canceled for not identifying as fat anymore. That didn't happen. So I didn't have to like bash fat people. I didn't feel the need to do that. You know what I'm saying? So if it's not as cancellation-y, then it wouldn't be as harsh. But, I had already denounced the toxic ritualistic. I had already done all that. So those bridges were already burned. I'll put it to you that way. But you have to differentiate yourself sometimes. And even online, when I started my activism, there's a lot of times where I had to be harsher to really differentiate myself, because they had done so much damage to the image of fat people by the time I started that I had to be very clear that I was not a fat activist. And I had to be very, very strong on that. So that happens too. If you kind of take over a space online, for example, then you have to really be strong against it sometimes. in order to, even as an activist, to make your point clear so that people know what you're advocating for or what you're doing. So it's also that too, and it's also true in terms of branding. So if you're having a rebrand, then sometimes you have to be very strong and say, like, I don't support body positivity anymore, or I'm not a part of that community anymore. You have to say these things. So I don't know if they're just playing dumb. I don't know. I would think that they would know this. Like I said, this isn't even just a fat thing, but I think what it is that they put fatness on such a pedestal that it's supposed to like rise above everything else, which, you know, we see that over and over again within the toxic ritualistic. So I think that's what that is.
There's a lot there, right? Like, and it's almost like the history of feminism 101. Like, this happens over and over and over again. I think definitely I have to start with the fact that the manufacturers and frankly the press have created a runway for this. When I think early on, when I was first talking openly about those emails, for example,
not able to take any accountability for the body positivity, fat acceptance community. She's not able to take any accountability for how they act.
One of the things that I couldn't understand was, why aren't you casting the spotlight on these manufacturers and these marketers who are engaging in predatory below the belt tactics? Why are you looking to these mostly feminine people, this community of mostly feminine people? And I think honestly, right, it's sexism, A. B, it's like, who do you have access to? Like, right, it's very hard to imagine like punching up at some CEO living in like wherever, right? Probably in Europe somewhere. And sort of imagining like him creating a reaction video, right? Like, he's not going to do it. I presume it's a dude, but he's not going to do it. But so I think there's like, it's like the way in which social media creates that access but I think what's important is vulnerability is all around this access, right? And I think the third thing, and it goes back to the way that I think it doubles back on the history of feminism, it doubles back on sexism, but the body positivity movement wanted to set a boundary. And, you know, there were people within it who were like, this is fine, your body, your choice, I don't care, it's not triggering me. But then there were people who were like, listen, you're gaslighting me, you're going against every stated value that you've had, and I'm not putting up with it, or like I'm having a feeling about it. And that's a boundary. And so what happens is that, unfortunately,
well, yes, and then the creator also puts a boundary up too, and then sometimes people split. It's what happens. I mean, it is what it is. That's just online 101.
Unfortunately, women having boundaries in public just doesn't seem to go very well. And so she becomes vilified.
Yes, but a lot of the creators are also women that are deciding to downsize as well.
And of course, again, these companies have created a runway for this language. Like, you know, they're like, well, we're the party of, like, GLP-1's like, we're the body of, we're the people behind body autonomy. We're the ones who believe in your choice. And so then all of a sudden a boundary gets called toxic. And I think that for me, I'm like, no, a boundary is not
somebody else choosing to downsize is not a boundary. It could be something you don't support, which fuck you for not supporting it, especially if somebody's very big and unhealthy. Fuck you. But I mean, the creator also has to put a boundary too, and it's their life. This is somebody's life. You know, the way that she's talking about this, I just don't even know. It's like, honey, like, get a grip, Virgie. Should I be more concerned about what people online think than my life, than my quality of life, than my life or death situation? I don't think so.
Evidence of toxicity. It's evidence of an expectation and a feeling, which
it's an evidence of being controlling. It's evidence of dehumanizing content creators and activists. That's what it's evidence of. People have the right to change their minds. A human being can change their mind. You don't have to follow them anymore. But if you cuss them out on the way out, then they might just say something back because they're still a human being too. I mean, she should know this better than anybody. Like, who is she fooling?
Think that, you know, at the end of the day, right, like every influencer or content creator gets to decide how they want to interact with those feelings and those boundaries. But the fact of the matter is that people have the right to have feelings. People have the right to have boundaries. And that's not evidence of toxicity, I think.
I love that you're bringing up boundaries, because another thing that really stood out to me from your Substack is you talk about the fact that when GLP-1 companies kind of infiltrate...
Nobody is entitled to another person's follow or support. And that's fine. That's true too. If somebody shifts, I wouldn't call it a boundary. I'd call it I don't support you anymore. Which, like I said, if you don't support somebody getting their health in order, fuck you. Period.
Infiltrate body positive spaces online, they are actually violating this implied consent and these implied boundaries. Because let's say you are someone who really loves following body positive influencers. In fact, it is your safe space. And in a way, it's like you're telling the algorithm, I want to see and support more of these people. Therefore, I'm kind of opting out of the creators and influencers who don't really spread that same message. And then when you have a GLP-1 company, let's say doing a brand deal with your favorite influencer, or literally just putting an ad on the subreddit that you love, it's almost kind of like they're tackling your mental health in a way that, like, they just did it without asking. And so sudden. And I kind of wanted to ask, like, could you maybe explain a little bit of, like, why you feel that GLP-1 companies, like, are kind of violating an implied consent and boundary when they kind of start to infiltrate those spaces? Because maybe there's some people who don't see it that way, or like didn't know that, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I think you explained it pretty well, but like fundamentally, okay, so to get into the psychology of someone who is a follower, like, and who is like a really authentic follower of someone, of one or more content creators in the body positive space. She's not just going there, you know, necessarily because she is a lover of like content. Or, like for example, I mean, someone can love like matcha, let's say, right? And they're gonna love every single matcha thing. This is not tied necessarily to their trauma, their identity, their childhood, like everything they've experienced. They just love matcha. That is not the person who is following body positive influencers. This is a person who...
So that's why she holds it. Because it's toxic ritualistic, she says, well, there's trauma tied into that, so it's held on a pedestal. That is interesting. That was a piece that just fell into place in my mind. That's why. So that's why it supersedes every other aspect of human psychology. It supersedes everything. Everything is subservient to fatness because fatness is tied to trauma. It's basically what she just said. Which I don't agree with that, but I understand it. So I guess that's what she'll try to say. That Ozempic is psychologically tearing apart people with trauma. And that's important because trauma is the number one thing of all. And everything else doesn't matter if trauma is involved with fatness. If I understood that correctly. Which I don't think that that's a healthy mindset at all. I'm just going to say that. I don't.
Who likely has experienced body dissatisfaction, who likely has disordered eating or a full-blown eating disorder, diagnosed or not. This is a person who has grappled with weight stigma, either in a very, very immense way or in a small way. They are going to these influencers as a mental health practice, because for like a therapy is very expensive, eating disorder treatment is very expensive. So when we're thinking about who's in the community of people following body positive content creators, we're talking about a wide spectrum of people. Like, we're talking about people who just, just love seeing cute people wearing cute things, living their best life. There's definitely that person. But there's also people for whom this is part of their recovery. This is part of their mental health practice. And I know for sure that therapists even, like literally in their treatment, encourage patients to follow body positive content creators. So,
okay, well, I don't know if they should do that then, because your recovery, when it comes to the toxic ritualistic, now this is going to be something that a lot of people don't want to hear, but it needs to be said. Your recovery, it's something you have to do alone, because no matter what, you're always going to have these moments where you're by yourself in the middle of the night. You're always going to have these experiences of isolation. And perhaps, my complete isolation in 2020 is how I developed that, because I went crazy when I was completely isolated. And so all I learned from that is like, your recovery, you have to do it. I mean, obviously you can have a spiritual practice involved with it. It can help. But if that's not for you, then you're totally on your own. But you can't base it on other people. Other people can be helpful, other people can support, but you can't root it in another person. Part of the toxic ritualistic is that we struggle with differentiation from other people. We struggle with individuation. So you have to individuate yourself from other people, which involves dealing with it alone. It doesn't mean you can't talk about it or share it or get emotional support, especially with other issues. I'm so upset. I'm triggered. This thing that I'm upset about, I feel the need to be INGE. I'm not going to be INGE. I'm going to talk to a friend, and I'm going to talk to them about what is triggering me and what's upsetting me so much. And I'm going to work and get help and support with this issue. But if that person doesn't pick up the phone, that doesn't mean that I be INGE. It means I have to find something else. I have to do something else. Because at the end of the day, my choice to not go back to that is mine alone. And it's not rooted, but you can have a support system, absolutely. Maybe that friend doesn't answer, then you call another friend, right? Because it's not rooted in that other person. And to put it onto online people, I mean, a lot of fat acceptance, it's always encouraging people to dive deeper and deeper and deeper into the toxic ritualistic. It's always reinforcing. And the very people that they claim to help, they're often hurting the most. And they even try to teach people that don't have these issues to act like they do. A good example of that is, you guys know Angelica. She told me that being a part of the fat acceptance community, it was making her overly identify with her fatness, which is a toxic ritualistic concept. And she's not even a part of that. She doesn't have that issue. So to normalize toxic ritualistic logic, concepts, behaviors to people that don't even have it, it is one of the most insidious, disgusting things you could possibly do. It is 100% a hurt people thing. It's horrible. Okay, you guys, I think I'm going to have to stop it there. This is kind of dark. Honestly, I wasn't expecting it to go here, and I'm sorry about that. But, fat acceptance is very negative. It's a very, very negative movement. And I hope I showed you that today. But I will talk to you guys next week. I hope you guys have a good rest of your day, night, etc. I'll see you soon. Bye.